Hello. And welcome to Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. Welcome to all members, friends, and guests here in person and virtually. My name is James Coombs, and I am a member of your Board of Trustees. I'd also like to acknowledge that this is Women's History Month, and this past Friday, there we go, and this past Friday, International Women's Day. There we go, okay. Neighborhood Church creates and grows an inclusive community of faith connected by love, spirit, and service. We acknowledge our presence on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples, the traditional caretakers of the lands and waters of this campus. With respect to the rights and wisdom of Indigenous people, we acknowledge our harmful colonial histories and commit to decolonizing our own practices, to learning new ways of being in community and with each other, in good relationship with the Indigenous peoples of this land and with the land itself. Today's service is led by Senior Minister Reverend Dr. Omega Burkhart, with music by Music Director Dr. Zenaida Robles, Associate Music Director Wells Lang, and the Neighborhood Treble Voices. Please take a moment to silence your devices as we begin our service. And thank you for joining us as we continue to prioritize connection over perfection in this hybrid service, which is streamed and recorded on YouTube. Families with young children are always welcome in the sanctuary or the narthex. Our order of service and extensive announcements are available as a link in the Sunday email, posted in the narthex, or through the QR code on the back of your hymnal. You can always get more information on these and many other activities at the welcome table. And again, welcome to Neighborhood Church, whoever you are and wherever you are in your spiritual journey. Welcome to this inclusive faith community connected by love, spirit, and service.
Welcome to Springing Forward on Pledge Kickoff Sunday. The words of our invocation come from my friend and colleague, the Reverend Kim Mason. She writes, "Once upon a time, chemists believed they could transform lead into gold or death into life. We laugh, but are we not also in the business of alchemy? Turning loneliness into connection, pain into comfort, anger into solidarity, and faith into action?" At this moment, I would like to invite up our pledge drive team for the 2024-2025 year. Come on up. They're going to light the chalice for us. Welcome to Shelby Carlson, May Colcord, and Andy Eaton. The subtle magic of church combines love with justice, creates hope out of fear, transforms individuals into community. Here we engage in a holy alchemy, finding beauty in the ordinary and life in the present. So come, let us be transformed together.
Today's music is offered in celebration of Women's History Month. Please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing hymn number 1026, "If Every Woman in the World."
If every woman in the world Good morning, neighborhood. No, I am not Hannah Peterson, but I do know where she lives. My name is Eric Peterson, and I'm her father. She is at home recovering from a cold, but we wish her well. I'd like to invite all the children to come down for the family story. This morning's story is about community building. It is entitled, Somebody Loves You, Mr. Hatch, story by Eileen Spinelli, pictures by Paul Yelowitz. Mr. Hatch was tall and thin, and he did not smile. Every morning at 6:30 sharp, he would leave his brick house and walk 8 blocks to the shoelace factory where he worked. At lunchtime, he would sit alone in a corner, eat his cheese and mustard sandwich, and drink a cup of coffee. Sometimes he brought a prune for dessert. It's a fruit. It's a kind of fruit, like a raisin, but really big. After work, he would make 2 stops at the newsstand to get the paper, and at the grocery store to buy fresh turkey wing for his supper. After supper, he read the paper, took a shower, and went to bed early. He keeps to himself. That is what everyone said about Mr. Hatch. One Saturday, when Mr. Hatch stepped onto the porch with his dustpan and broom, he got a surprise. A package wrapped in brown paper. He had never spoken to the postman before. "Thank you, Mr. Goober," he said. Mr. Goober smiled. "You're welcome. I always enjoy delivering packages." Mr. Hatch tore the brown paper off. Inside was a white box, which he opened to another box. This one was heart-shaped. We know what that is. All satiny red with a pink bow on top. It was filled with candy. Something fluttered to the porch floor. It was a little white card. He picked it up. It said, "Somebody loves you." Only then did he remember that this was Valentine's Day. Mr. Hatch wondered and wondered, now who would send this to me? He was all alone, he had no friends, and yet someone had sent him a Valentine. Who? He put the box on the coffee table and tried to do some dusting, but every time he left the room, he had to keep peeking to see if the box was still there. He couldn't believe it. He dusted and dusted, and the dust cloth seemed to whisper, "Somebody loves you. Somebody loves you." At last, he flung the dust cloth away and exclaimed, "Why, I've got a secret admirer." And then he did something he had never done before. He laughed. He laughed and danced and clapped his hands, and then he took a piece of candy from the box and ate it. Mr. Hatch changed his shirt and found some old aftershave in the bottom drawer. He splashed it on his face. He picked out a yellow tie with blue polka dots and put it on. And then he went for a walk. Maybe, he thought, I will meet the person who sent me the candy. Of course, no one had ever seen Mr. Hatch wearing a tie or smelling of aftershave or smiling, so he got a lot of attention. Mrs. Weed tripped over her dog. Mr. Dunwoody nearly fell off of his ladder. And little Tina Finn spilled all the toys out of her wagon. Mr. Hatch just waved hello to them all. On Monday, it was back to work. At lunchtime, Mr. Hatch sat in the middle of the cafeteria. He spoke to everyone and passed out chocolates from his heart box. On the way home, as usual, he stopped at the newsstand. Mr. Smith handed him the usual newspaper. "I think I'll have a pack of mints," said Mr. Hatch, not as usual. Mr. Smith was shocked. "Was that you speaking, Mr. Hatch?" "Indeed it was," said Mr. Hatch. "I said I would also like a pack of mints. And if you don't mind my saying so, Mr. Smith, you don't look very well today." Mr. Smith recovered from his shock to reply, "You're right. I don't feel very well. I have a cold. I was supposed to go to the doctor's this afternoon, but the stand has been so busy I haven't had the time." Mr. Hatch smiled. "Why, I'd be happy to watch the stand for you while you go." Mr. Smith could hardly believe his ears. "You would?" "Certainly. Just show me what to do." And so Mr. Hatch ran the newsstand for an hour. He wondered if any of the women who had stopped to buy the paper or magazine or a candy bar had sent him the mysterious Valentine. When Mr. Smith returned, Mr. Hatch made his usual stop at the grocery store. "I'm a little tired of turkey wings," he told Mr. Todd. "I think I'll have a nice fresh slice of ham." Mr. Todd weighed the meat and wrapped it. "You look worried," said Mr. Hatch. "I am," said Mr. Todd. "My little girl is late. She hasn't come home from the school yet, and I can't leave the store to look for her until my wife arrives." "Goodness, why didn't you say so?" said Mr. Hatch. "I will go look for her." And so he walked to the school and found little Melanie Todd by the swings and brought her home. Thank you, said the grocer. "Any time," said Mr. Hatch. After supper, Mr. Hatch did not bother to read the paper. He decided to bake brownies instead. It would be nice to have brownies to share the next day with the people at the shoelace factory. As he baked the warm chocolate, smell of brownies floated through the neighborhood. Children gathered round Mr. Hatch's house, smiling, sniffing the air. "Well, I suppose the factory can wait," said Mr. Hatch as he looked out the window and brought out 2 platefuls. "Now, what are brownies without lemonade?" "A lot of sugar," he said, and he stirred up a nice cold pitcher. When the parents came to gather their children, they had some brownies too. It turned out to be a picnic in Mr. Hatch's backyard. He dusted off an old harmonica and played songs he remembered from his boyhood. Everyone danced. Wow, he's a fun guy. And so the days and weeks went by. When Mr. Hatch wasn't smiling, he was laughing. And when he wasn't laughing, he was helping someone. And when he wasn't helping someone, he was having a party in his yard or on his porch. He seemed to have forgotten about finding the person who sent him the Valentine. Then one afternoon, Mr. Goober, the postman, came to his door. His face was very serious. "Come in, Mr. Goober," said Mr. Hatch. "You look upset." "I am upset," he said. I made a mistake some time ago. My supervisor is very angry with me. Do you... Yes, Mr. Goober, what is it? Do you recall the package I delivered to you on Valentine's Day, I think it was? Yes, I believe so, replied Mr. Hatch, beginning to feel a little uneasy. I don't suppose you still have it, said Mr. Goober sadly. As a matter of fact, said Mr. Hatch, I still have the box. The candy's gone, though. Why do you ask? The postman took a deep breath. I'm afraid I delivered it to the wrong address. It was supposed to go to another house. Mr. Hatch recalled tearing off the brown paper. It had never occurred to him to look at the address. He fetched the heart-shaped box and the pink bow and gave them to the postman. I do hope your supervisor won't be too angry with you now. The postman was heading down the sidewalk when Mr. Hatch called him from his porch. "Mr. Goober, I forgot something." He gave the postman the little white card. "Somebody loves you." Alone in his living room, Mr. Hatch sighed. Nobody loved me after all. Then he read the paper, took his shower, and went to bed early. The next morning at 6:30 sharp, Mr. Hatch left his brick house and walked the 8 blocks to the shoelace factory. At lunchtime, he sat in the corner by himself, ate his cheese and mustard sandwich, and drank a cup of coffee. After work, he stopped at the newsstand for his paper, but he did not speak to Mr. Smith. And when he ordered his turkey wing for Mr. Todd, he did not smile. Nor did he pat little Melanie Todd on the head, or bake brownies, or have picnics or parties, or play his old harmonica anymore. Everyone whispered, "What's wrong with Mr. Hatch?" Mr. Goober, the postman, told them. "We love Mr. Hatch," insisted Mr. and Mrs. Dunwoody. "He gave us flowers from our garden, for our garden. He helped to mend our back fence." Mrs. Weed nodded. "I love him too. He saved his bones for my dog Ruffy." Ruffy barked. She loved Mr. Hatch too. Mr. Smith told everyone how Mr. Hatch had watched his newsstand so he could visit the doctor. And Mr. Todd told everyone how Mr. Hatch had found his little girl. All the children in the neighborhood remembered Mr. Hatch's wonderful brownies and lemonade. And most of all, his laughter. "Poor Mr. Hatch," they said. "What can we do?" Then Mr. Goober announced, "I have an idea." On Saturday morning, Mr. Hatch woke up to a bright and sunny day. He put on his old overalls and went out to the porch with his dustpan and broom. He couldn't believe his eyes. All over the porch were red and white hearts and pink bows. There were boxes of candy on the chairs and yellow streamers flowing from the ceiling. And sticking up out of his mailbox was a shining silver harmonica. The front yard was filled with people, happy, smiling people. They were holding up a huge sign with hand-painted letters. It said, "Everybody loves Mr. Hatch." Me too. Mr. Hatch dabbed a tear with his handkerchief. "I do believe," he smiled. "Somebody loves me after all." And then he smiled, and then he laughed, and then he hurried down to be with his friends. Thank you.
I'd like to share a reading with you this morning. This is a selection that comes from an essay written by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Some of you may be familiar with her work. Probably her most widely available published work is called Braiding Sweetgrass. She is an indigenous botanist from the Potawatomi Nation. Her work centers the learnings that she has from her ancestral teachings, her understandings of plants and the cycles of nature, as well as her scientific teachings. She writes in this essay about the webs of mutual support that are centered in indigenous ways of knowing, as well as mirroring those that are found in nature. She writes this, the serviceberry. I cherish the notion of a gift economy, that we might back away from the grinding market economy that reduces everything to a commodity and leaves most of us bereft of what we really want: relationship and purpose and beauty and meaning, which can never be commoditized. I want to be a part of a system in which wealth means having enough to share, and where the gratification of meeting your family needs is not poisoned by destroying that possibility for someone else. I want to live in a society where the currency of exchange is gratitude and is infinitely renewable as a resource of kindness, which multiplies every time it is shared rather than depreciating with use. You might rightly observe that we no longer live in small, insular societies where generosity and mutual esteem structure our relations. But we could. It is within our power to create such webs of interdependence quite outside the market economy. Intentional communities of mutual self-reliance and reciprocity are the wave of the future, and their currency is sharing. The move toward a local food economy, for example, is not just about freshness and food miles and carbon footprints and soil organic matter. It is all of those things, but it is also about the deeply human desire for connection, to be in reciprocity with the gifts that are given to you. The real human need that such arrangements address are exactly what we long for, yet cannot ever purchase: being valued for your own unique gifts, earning the regard of your neighbors for the quality of your character, not the quantity of your possessions, what you give, not what you have. I don't think market capitalism is going to disappear anytime soon, she writes. The faceless institutions that benefit from it are too entrenched. But I don't think it's pie in the sky to imagine that we can create incentives to nurture a gift economy that runs right alongside the market economy, where the good that is served is community. After all, what we crave is not trickle-down, faceless profits, but reciprocal, face-to-face relationships, which are naturally abundant but made scarce by the anonymity of large-scale economics. We have the power to change that, to develop the local, reciprocal economies that serve community rather than undermine it.
We're delighted also to have with us today guest pianist Catherine Eames.
Thank you, Dr. Zenaida Robles, for that original piece. And for the treble voices who brought it to life today. Thank you. About a year or so ago, I decided to undertake a sermon writing experiment, which can go either way. I was feeling that my process was becoming a little stale. I thought perhaps a new homiletic procedure would help me approach sermon writing with some new perspectives I hadn't considered. I've been a public speaker of one sort or another most of my life, teaching or in other ways, and my academic training usually takes the wheel when preparing sermons. I sit down and create an outline and then write it out in nicely formatted paragraphs, as if someone else were reading it, and they're not. I usually type them out well ahead of actually practicing saying them out loud. So one day, I decided I would voice type. In other words, I would talk and let my computer capture my words as I spoke, including all the wonderings and the stutters and the weird restarts, the mispronunciations, strange paragraph placements. It was an effort to let go of form. Now, at that time, I was living alone in San Diego with my small dog, Jack, feeling a little self-conscious about just talking to myself in my living room. I preached to him. He was not inspired. But I did manage to get a sermon out on the virtual page, and I was proud of myself for doing so. I sat back and looked at my screen and reread what I had attempted to say out loud, and I got to the last line and had no idea where it came from. It said, "Maybe so, I'm in." And I read it again, "Maybe so, I'm in." I thought, I didn't say that. And then I realized that I end every sermon with, "May it be so, amen." There are few moments in our lives when our theology so inexplicably and beautifully, spontaneously erupts on the page as that. Maybe so, I thought, I'm in. I'm in for what? I don't know. But I'm here. And for a non-creedal religion, such as Unitarian Universalism, that works out perfectly. We prioritize action. We prioritize being together over the requirement to believe in one thing. Believe in what? I don't know, maybe so. But I'm in. I was reminded of this exercise in homiletics recently in our ramping up for the pledge drive this year, the theme of which is I'm in. I heard that and I was like, I have a story about that. Did you all realize how close amen is to I'm in? Perfect. How fitting, right? In other bad puns about religion and money, I submit to you the title of my sermon, an inside joke amongst ministers, and it's not my own. I stole it, The Sermon on the Amount. Today, as the opening of our pledge drive. Now, we talk a lot about generosity in the context of being a people of faith. It is so ingrained in our language and our rituals associated with ours and other religious traditions that it can be hard to separate the two. At its best, which we will get to in a moment, generosity is a natural outpouring of mutual aid, born of respect, done in the name of joy and care. But at its worst, and sometimes maybe its most common, it can feel, simply put, icky to talk about generosity at church in the context of money. This can become especially salient when those of us who have suffered religious trauma or are simply aghast at the ways that generosity has been equated to being pious in the name of grotesquely enriching individuals or harmful structures. Add to this a cultural norm outside of church that suggests that talking about money is taboo or gauche, and you have the perfect storm for wanting to avoid the topic at all cost. So, let's talk about it. Let's be open about it. Let's get into the details of it. But first, I want to contextualize what generosity means in the Unitarian Universalist world. Right now, we're going through a revision of the Unitarian Universalist bylaws. We will vote on them later this summer, adding generosity to our values. It is already one of our values. We are just articulating it. It is defined by cultivating a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. In other words, it's our time, our talent, and our treasure. You've probably heard that phrase before. Our time, treasure, and talent that keeps communities such as this one functioning. Let's be clear. We don't, as a congregation, we don't receive money from outside sources. Unlike other religious institutions, each one of our Unitarian Universalist congregations is financially independent from each other. The programming, the buildings, the staffing, all of that comes directly from the support of this community, either by the volunteers who make things happen, the talent and the training of the congregational leaders and staff, and the financial resources that are donated. But I want to be also clear about something else. Our church community is more than a collection of activities. This is not a social club. It's more than that. Yes, it is social, and that is fundamentally important for many of us, but it is more than that. We choose to become members of a church because we choose to create an intentional community that is a microcosm for how we want the world to be, alongside others who are also committed to certain actions that mutually move us in that direction together. When you become a member of a church and you donate, it is also a reaction against transactional or extractive capitalism. Capitalism that creates markets that thrive off of simulated scarcity. When you become a member of a church and you choose to financially support it, you are creating the experience and space for the spiritual development for yourself and for other people. There's no way to quantify that. There's no way to measure that. There's no limit. There's no bounds to that. There's no measurable or transactional consumer dynamic that takes place when you support a church. There's no scarcity in that. That is only generosity. That is only abundance. So when we talk about the financial support of this congregation, we are not talking about a tithe. That is a word that is often associated with this. That is an amount that is required to participate based on your income. We do not have that. A few weeks ago, some of you were here when I spoke at great length about membership, what it takes to become a member. And I want to be clear that you can attend here forever and never become a member. But if you decide to become a member and you choose to sign that paperwork and you choose to enter in a covenantal relationship with us, you will be asked to make a pledge. This is part of the process The answer can be 0, and that's okay. There's no minimum. There's no maximum either. I said that before. I'll say it again probably. But there's no minimum. We're happy you're here. But we do ask if you would like to contribute financially. By deciding on a pledge that works for you, that's important to you, you're committing to a real and tangible way to the financial planning for literally this upcoming church year that starts this summer. Our budget depends on your pledge to support this church throughout the coming year. In the words of Robin Wall Kimmerer, we have the power to develop local, reciprocal economies that serve community rather than undermine it. So, what is the amount? It is the sermon on the amount, after all. What is the amount? You'll hear more in a few minutes from our pledge team about the specifics, but I'd like to give you some context. This year's goal for the pledge drive donations is $550,000. That's a tremendous amount of money, only doable if it is shared amongst many. It represents a bit less than half of the overall budget for this church, the other half coming from rental income primarily. This budget number is supported by you, the over 400, about 440 members of this congregation. Now, when I talk about membership numbers, I'm talking about individuals, but we in the pledging world, we also consider another number that is important, which is a pledging unit. So those are families that pledge as one, or those in committed relationships. So you might hear both numbers, members and pledging units. I'd also like to highlight we have friends who are not members who also pledge. If you'd like to know about membership, let me know also. Now, folks ask, well, what is the amount then if there's not a tithe that the church asks? Well, and I say very roughly, because this depends on everyone's particular circumstances, that 5% is often a number you will hear. 5% of your income, although we don't ask for proof of that, and everyone's availability will depend on their circumstances. And I want to recognize that many of you continuously and generously give far beyond that. I also want to honor that many of you have become members here with a pledge of 0, and you are still welcome here. We are still glad you are here. Now, in national trends, what this looks like is this. I described a few weeks ago some trends in membership, and if you'll recall, of the 900 and something, close to 1,000 Unitarian Universalist congregations, Neighborhood Church falls in the top 50 largest in the country, in the top 50 in terms of membership numbers. So if that is a helpful visual for you, of 1,000, we are sitting there. The Reverend Matthew Johnson, who preached at my installation, helped distill some of these numbers, suggests that about 73 congregations have an average pledge of over $3,000. So that is a pledging unit, either an individual or a pledging unit. 73. About 330 congregations have a pledge between $2,000 and $3,000. We fall in that lower end at Neighborhood Church. 367 are between 1,000 and 2,000, and 133 congregations below 1,000. So the median average pledge in the United States is about $1,900, was last year, I should say. Now, Pasadena has a geo-index of 6 out of 8. That means in this region, we are at about 100 to 120% the national average for cost of living. So that means everything here is more expensive. Maintenance, buildings, incomes, etc. So I want to clarify, we're talking about pledge amounts. We're in our pledge kickoff. This is the amount that you agree to donate to our church over the next year, either in one lump sum or divided up over the year in smaller increments. This is not the money that is left by some of you in agreements in your living wills or otherwise. That does not play a part in our operating budget. It also has nothing to do with our monies collected by the Share the Plate team every Sunday that go to affiliated or local organizations that you all have determined to be important relationships. So even when you donate to an affiliated organization from this church for Share the Plate, that money does not become part of our operating budget. That goes directly to that organization. Pledging, on the other hand, stays at this church and is used right here for programming, buildings, and staffing needs. You all have made this community possible through your giving, through the giving of your time, through the giving of your talents, and of your treasure. You have shown and continue to show your desire to be proximate, to be up close and personal with the joyous work of creating and continuing and fostering this community. We are glad you are here, no matter what. You are important and valued, no matter what. We are also thankful to those of you who sustain this church with your yearly giving and have done so for some time. And we are thankful for those of you who are joining us maybe for the first time today, or those of you who have pledged for the first time. We are also thankful for many of you early birds who have even pledged before the pledge kickoff today. You show through your actions, through your commitment to this community, you have shown that the answer to the question, is this community important in my life? You have shown it to be yes. You have shown maybe so. And you have declared boldly, I'm in. And I am gratefully thankful for that. I'd like to invite Shelby Carlson to come up.
Good morning. Some of you may remember me coming up to the pulpit last year to give my testimonial for the pledge drive as the first member to pledge last year. This year, I decided I needed to one-up myself, so I became one of your pledge drive chairs, alongside May and Andy. Besides being an overachiever who likes to take on way more than I should and say yes to everything that's asked of me, I was really drawn to this position because of my love for neighborhood church and my desire to see it continue to thrive for years and decades to come. This last year of being a member at Neighborhood has profoundly changed my life for the better and has offered me the spiritual community that I've been craving most of my life. Neighborhood is a welcoming and inclusive community where everyone belongs and offers us each the chance to share our commonalities and grow from our diversity. Neighborhood would not be the place it is without the love, care, and support each and every one of us brings to the community. Alongside volunteering and participation, pledging is a vital aspect to our community thriving. Our theme for the pledge drive this year is I'm in. Being in means each and every one of us taking initiative and investing in ourselves as a community. Without our investment, we put our flourishing community at risk. This year's pledge drive total goal is $550,000. However, I want to highlight a number that matters. The UUA raised the GEO index for Pasadena from a level 5 to a level 6 out of 8, as Reverend Omega had mentioned. The largest portion of our budget goes towards the compensation and applicable benefits for our incredible staff members here at Neighborhood. In order for every staff member to receive the level of fair compensation, we would need to exceed raising $630,000 in pledges. I urge each and every one of us to consider the impact of your pledge, especially considering what that would mean for our valued staff members. Please give generously and intentionally as you fill out your pledge forms this year. Again, I want to reiterate how special of a place we all make Neighborhood by each and every one of us being a member here. This community of communities is only possible through the inclusivity, interdependence, and integrity we bring every day. This year, I'm in at Neighborhood. I'm inspired to be involved and invested in our community and continuing to see it flourish. Thank you to all of you who continue to include me, inform me, invigorate me, and inspire me. We will be passing out pledge forms for you to fill out now, or you can use the QR code on the screens to direct you to the online form to fill out. If you don't remember your pledge from last year, but want to increase it by a certain percentage, feel free to put that specific percentage on the line. As well, if you want to have the same amount from last year, feel free to put same on that line and indicate that you would like to keep the same pledge. As we collect the forms, please fold it in half to fit on the plate and to protect privacy. Also, I do want to thank everyone who did pre-pledge. We've had over 10% of families here who have already pledged, so thank you so much to all of us on the pledge team. We really appreciate everything that all of you are doing. Thank you so much for your pledges.
Give thanks for the past, for those who had vision, who planted and watered so dreams could come true. Give thanks for the now, for study, for worship, for mission that bids us turn prayer into deeds. Thank you very much to those of you who are filling out your forms. Please join us in singing our closing hymn this morning, 404, What Gift Can We Bring?
What
We bring our gifts to this community to create and support the interwoven web that connects us all, that supports us all. As we leave here today, let us be reminded and let us be thankful for the generosity of our beloveds here who have proclaimed, Amen. May it be so. Amen.